The octopus is sitting in a glass jar at the bottom of the aquarium. Researchers put it there as part of an experiment, screwing the lid on tight from the outside before lowering it into the water. The octopus doesn't panic. It doesn't thrash or squeeze against the glass trying to escape. Instead, it does something that makes the researchers watching go completely silent. It reaches up with one arm, grabs the inside of the lid, and begins to twist. Not randomly, not frantically. With deliberate measured rotation, turning the lid counterclockwise, the exact direction needed to unscrew it from the inside. 30 seconds later, the lid pops off. The octopus climbs out, pushes the jar away, and jets across the tank like nothing unusual just happened. Think about what this means. The octopus has never encountered a screw-top jar before. Nothing in its evolutionary history prepared it for this specific problem. But it observed how the jar was sealed, understood the mechanism of a threaded lid, figured out that rotation would reverse the process, and executed the solution perfectly. This isn't instinct. Instinct is hardwired behavior that works the same way every time. This is problem solving. This is an animal looking at a novel situation, analyzing it, and inventing a solution on the spot. And that jar escape is just the beginning. Because when you look closely at what octopuses can actually do, the problems they solve, the ways they manipulate their environment, and the speed at which they learn completely new behaviors, you realize something unsettling. The octopus has an intelligence that operates on completely different principles than ours. Its brain is structured nothing like a mammal brain. Its neurons are distributed throughout its body in ways that seem impossible. And yet, it demonstrates cognitive abilities that rival some of the smartest animals on Earth. So what makes the octopus so dangerously intelligent? And why does that intelligence work in ways that are so fundamentally alien that studying it might teach us something profound about what intelligence actually is? Because once you understand how an octopus thinks, how it processes information, and how it uses that processing power to solve problems that would stump most animals, you'll see why this creature represents one of the strangest forms of intelligence evolution has ever produced. Inside a research facility in Seattle, an octopus named Billy has learned something that shouldn't be possible for an invertebrate. She's learned to recognize individual human faces, not just that someone is approaching her tank. She can tell which specific person it is, and she responds differently depending on who she sees. One researcher, the one who feeds her regularly, gets an enthusiastic response. Billy moves toward the glass, changes color to a lighter shade, extends her arms in what looks like greeting. Another researcher, the one who occasionally has to catch her for health checks, gets the opposite reaction. Billy darkens, retreats to the far corner of the tank, and if that researcher puts their hand in the water, Billy jets away or sprays water at them. She's not responding to smell or movement patterns. The researchers tested this by having different people wear the same clothes, use the same approach patterns, even apply the same scents. Billy still knew who was who. She was identifying them by their faces. This is remarkable because facial recognition requires incredibly complex neural processing. Your brain has an entire region, the fusiform face area, dedicated specifically to recognizing faces. It has to process subtle variations in features, compare them to stored memories, and make identifications based on patterns that might differ only slightly from person to person. Octopuses don't have a fusiform face area. They don't have a cerebral cortex. Their brain structure is so different from vertebrates that for a long time scientists assumed sophisticated cognition like facial recognition would be impossible. But Billy is doing it anyway. And to understand how, you need to understand something fundamental about octopus neurology that makes their intelligence genuinely alien. An octopus has approximately 500 million neurons. That's roughly the same number as a dog, more than a cat, and about 9 times more than a rat. So in terms of raw neural hardware, octopuses are working with serious computational power. But here's where it gets strange. Only about 40% of those neurons are in the brain. The other 60%, roughly 300 million neurons, are distributed throughout the 8 arms. Think about what this means. Each arm has its own neural cluster, its own ganglion that processes information and controls movement semi-independently. These arm ganglia aren't just relay stations passing signals from the brain to the muscles. They're processing centers capable of making decisions on their own. Researchers discovered this through experiments that seem like something from science fiction. They severed an octopus arm, keeping it alive in oxygenated seawater. The arm, completely disconnected from the brain, continued to behave purposefully. It reached toward food. It recoiled from unpleasant stimuli. It even successfully navigated a simple maze, making turns and avoiding obstacles without any input from a central brain. This is distributed intelligence, and it creates a way of processing information that's fundamentally different from how vertebrate brains work. When you decide to pick up an object, your brain sends signals down your spinal cord to your arm muscles. Your brain controls every aspect of the movement, calculating angles, coordinating muscle contractions, adjusting grip strength. It's centralized processing. Everything runs through headquarters. When an octopus reaches for something, its brain sends a high-level command, something like, "Arm 3, grab that crab." But the arm itself figures out how to execute that command. The neurons in that specific arm calculate the trajectory, coordinate the hundreds of suckers that need to grip, adjust for water current, and handle all the fine motor control without bothering the central brain. It's like having 8 semi-autonomous agents working for you, each one capable of solving problems independently, while still coordinating with the central command when necessary. This distributed architecture gives octopuses a massive advantage. They can process multiple tasks simultaneously because different arms are literally thinking about different problems at the same time. One arm can be investigating a crevice for food, while another arm is manipulating a shell for shelter, while a third arm is monitoring for predators, all happening in parallel with separate neural processing. But this creates a bizarre problem that reveals just how alien octopus intelligence really is. How does an animal maintain a coherent sense of self when 60% of its neurons are scattered across 8 semi-independent limbs? When you think about your arm, you know where it is without looking at it. You have proprioception, the sense of your body's position in space. That information flows constantly from your limbs to your brain, creating a unified body map. Octopuses don't seem to have this. Researchers have observed octopuses reaching into holes and crevices, feeling around with their arms, and they show no indication that their brain knows exactly what those arms are touching until the arm reports back with relevant information. It's as if each arm is doing its own investigation and only tells the central brain, "Hey, I found something interesting over here," when it discovers something worth reporting. This should create chaos. 8 semi-independent agents doing their own thing with minimal central oversight should result in completely uncoordinated behavior, arms working against each other, the octopus tying itself in knots. But that's not what happens. Octopuses move with fluid coordination. Their arms work together seamlessly. They solve complex physical problems that require precise coordination between multiple limbs. So how do they do it? How does an animal with a distributed nervous system maintain enough coordination to function effectively? The answer appears to be chemical communication between the arms themselves. Researchers have found that octopus arms communicate with each other through chemical signals that travel across the skin, creating a peer-to-peer network where arms share information directly without routing everything through the central brain. It's like having a group chat where your limbs are talking to each other, coordinating their actions, sharing what they're sensing, all happening below the level of conscious awareness. This is intelligence that works on completely different organizational principles than vertebrate cognition, and it gives octopuses capabilities that seem impossible for their body plan. When an octopus squeezes through a tiny gap in rocks, something they do regularly to hide from predators or access prey, they're solving a problem that requires each arm to independently assess the space, adjust its shape, coordinate with other arms to avoid blocking the path, and time its movement to flow through the opening smoothly. Your brain couldn't handle this. You have 4 limbs and centralized processing, and you still struggle to coordinate all of them simultaneously for complex tasks. An octopus has 8 limbs that are infinitely more flexible than yours, and it coordinates them flawlessly using a distributed system where the limbs largely manage themselves. This is what makes octopus intelligence dangerous. Not dangerous in the sense of threatening to humans, but dangerous in the sense that it works so differently from our intelligence that it challenges our basic assumptions about what cognition requires. We assume intelligence needs centralized processing, a brain that controls everything. The octopus proves that's wrong. We assume complex problem-solving requires a unified sense of self and body awareness. The octopus proves that's wrong too. And when you look at what this alien architecture allows them to do, you realize their intelligence isn't just different. In some ways, it's better. A giant Pacific octopus is hunting in the waters off British Columbia. It's moving slowly across the rocky bottom, arms extended, feeling into every crack and crevice. This is how octopuses hunt, not with speed or ambush like most predators, but through methodical investigation, using those semi-autonomous arms to search dozens of potential hiding spots simultaneously. One arm finds something, a crab, tucked deep into a narrow gap between rocks, a space barely wider than the crab's shell. Watch what happens next, because this is where octopus intelligence becomes genuinely impressive. The octopus doesn't try to grab the crab immediately. Instead, it explores the gap with the tip of one arm, feeling the dimensions, assessing the space. Then it does something that requires understanding of three-dimensional geometry and mechanical problem-solving. It inserts two arms into the gap from different angles, one from above, one from the side. The arms probe deeper, working around the crab, which is now trying to wedge itself even tighter into the space. But the octopus arms are incredibly flexible, boneless, capable of bending and twisting in ways that would snap any vertebrate limb. The two arms meet behind the crab. The suckers on each arm grip the crab's shell, and then, with coordinated pulling from two different vectors simultaneously, they extract the crab from a space it should have been completely safe in. This entire sequence took maybe 20 seconds. But think about what just happened. The octopus assessed a three-dimensional problem, a crab, in a complex space with limited access points. It formulated a solution that required inserting arms from multiple angles and coordinating their movement to apply force in specific directions. And it executed that solution smoothly, with two semi-autonomous limbs working together to solve a puzzle that would challenge most animals. This is spatial reasoning. This is mechanical problem solving. And octopuses do this constantly. Every time they hunt, every time they build a shelter, every time they manipulate objects in their environment. But here's where it gets even more impressive. Octopuses don't just solve these problems through trial and error. They learn to solve them faster. Researchers at the University of Cambridge tested this by presenting octopuses with a puzzle box containing food. The box had a sliding mechanism that needed to be opened in a specific sequence. The first time an octopus encountered this box, it took several minutes of investigation, pushing and pulling various parts, before it figured out the solution. The second time they gave the same octopus the same box, it opened it in under a minute. The third time, 30 seconds. By the fifth attempt, the octopus would approach the box and open it immediately, going straight for the correct sequence without any wasted effort. This is learning through experience. This is memory formation and retrieval. The octopus isn't just solving the same problem repeatedly from scratch. It's remembering the solution and applying that knowledge more efficiently each time. But the researchers took it further. They modified the box slightly, changing the mechanism so it required a different sequence to open. Most animals would be completely confused by this. They'd try to apply the old solution, fail, and have to start over from the beginning. The octopuses paused for a moment when the old sequence didn't work. Then they investigated the modification, figured out the new sequence, and adapted their approach. They weren't just remembering a specific motor pattern. They were understanding the underlying principle that these boxes have mechanisms that can be manipulated, and they were flexible enough to adjust their strategy when the mechanism changed. This is abstract learning. This is transfer of knowledge from one problem to a modified version of that problem. And it demonstrates a level of cognitive flexibility that's remarkable for any animal, let alone an invertebrate with a nervous system that barely resembles ours. But the learning goes even deeper than individual problem solving. Because octopuses don't just learn from their own experience, They learn from watching other octopuses. Researchers set up an experiment with two tanks side by side. In one tank, they placed an octopus that had already learned to solve a particular puzzle. In the adjacent tank, they placed a naive octopus that had never seen the puzzle before. The naive octopus could see the experienced octopus through the glass. And what happened next shouldn't be possible for an animal that's supposed to be a solitary, asocial creature. The naive octopus watched. It positioned itself at the glass and observed the experienced octopus solving the puzzle, manipulating the mechanism, retrieving the food. Then, when researchers presented the same puzzle to the naive octopus, it solved it significantly faster than octopuses that hadn't observed another individual first. This is observational learning. This is social cognition. And it reveals something profound about octopus intelligence that contradicts everything we thought we knew about their lifestyle. Octopuses are not social animals. They don't live in groups. They don't cooperate in the wild. They have no evolutionary pressure to develop social learning because they spend their entire adult lives as solitary hunters, and yet they're capable of learning by observation. They're capable of watching another individual perform an action and extracting useful information from that observation to improve their own performance. This suggests their intelligence isn't narrowly adapted to specific survival needs. It's general purpose. It's flexible enough to learn from any available source of information, even sources they would never encounter in their natural environment. That's what makes octopus intelligence dangerous. It's not optimized for one specific type of problem. It's a general learning system capable of adapting to completely novel situations that evolution never prepared them for. And nowhere is this more apparent than in how they interact with the one type of environment evolution definitely didn't prepare them for: human structures. Aquariums have a love-hate relationship with octopuses. On one hand, they're fascinating to study and amazing to watch. On the other hand, they're escape artists that can cause chaos if they get out of their tanks, and they get out of their tanks constantly. Despite the best efforts of aquarium designers to create octopus-proof enclosures, the National Aquarium in Baltimore lost an octopus in the 1970s. Staff arrived one morning to find the tank empty. They searched everywhere, checking filtration systems, examining the floor around the tank, looking for a body because surely the octopus had died somewhere. They found it 3 tanks away, very much alive. Sitting inside a tank full of fish it had been eating like an all-you-can-eat buffet. Here's what apparently happened. The octopus climbed out of its own tank during the night. It crossed several feet of open floor, completely out of water. It climbed up the outside of another tank, squeezed through a gap near the filter intake that was barely 2 inches wide, dropped into the water, and spent the night hunting fish that had no idea they were sharing space with an apex predator. This escape required solving multiple novel problems: how to get out of the first tank without injury, how to navigate across dry land without suffocating, how to identify which tank contained food, how to access that tank, how to enter the water safely. None of these problems exist in the ocean. Natural selection never equipped octopuses with instincts for escaping glass tanks or navigating aquarium floors. And yet this octopus figured it out, solving each problem in sequence to achieve a goal that required planning multiple steps ahead. And this isn't an isolated incident. Aquariums around the world have documented octopuses escaping, and the methods they use reveal genuine problem-solving intelligence. Some octopuses learn to push their tank lids off by pressing upward with their arms in coordinated sequence, each arm adding force until the lid slides aside. Others learn to manipulate drain mechanisms, understanding that certain configurations cause water levels to drop and create exit opportunities. Some have even learned to recognize night staff versus day staff, only attempting escapes when the night staff, who check less frequently, are on duty. This last one is particularly remarkable. It means octopuses are capable of tracking patterns in human behavior, recognizing that different outcomes occur depending on time of day and which humans are present, and timing their actions accordingly. That's not just intelligence, that's cunning. That's the kind of strategic thinking you'd expect from mammals like foxes or raccoons, animals with evolutionary pressure to outsmart both predators and prey. But octopuses aren't mammals. They're mollusks. They're more closely related to clams and snails than to anything with a backbone. And yet they're demonstrating cognitive abilities that rival some primates. And this raises the most fascinating question about octopus intelligence. How did this happen? How did a creature that's essentially a sophisticated snail develop problem-solving abilities that compete with animals that have had hundreds of millions more years to evolve complex brains? The answer lies in the specific challenges octopuses faced evolutionally, and understanding those challenges reveals why their intelligence evolved to be so dangerous. Around 300 million years ago, the ancestors of modern octopuses were shelled creatures, similar to nautiluses. They had hard external shells that provided protection from predators. Life was relatively simple. Find food, hide in your shell when threatened, reproduce. Then something changed. Some lineages began losing their shells, gradually evolving into soft-bodied creatures that had no hard protection whatsoever. This seems like a terrible evolutionary strategy. Soft bodies are vulnerable. Predators can damage them easily. Without armor, you're basically swimming prey, but losing the shell provided massive advantages. Suddenly, you could squeeze through tiny gaps to escape predators. You could hide in spaces that shelled animals couldn't access. You could move faster, change shape, adopt strategies that rigid shells made impossible. The trade-off was stark. You gained flexibility and speed, but you lost defensive armor. You became vulnerable to everything with teeth or a beak. This created intense evolutionary pressure. If you're soft and vulnerable, you need to be smart enough to avoid getting killed. You need to be good at hiding, excellent at escaping, capable of outsmarting predators that are faster and stronger than you. And this is exactly what happened. Octopuses evolved intelligence as a survival strategy specifically because they were so physically vulnerable. But here's where it gets interesting. Different octopus species evolved in different environments with different predators, and this created different types of intelligence optimized for different challenges. The giant Pacific octopus lives in cold northern waters, where predators are relatively sparse but food is scattered and hard to find. These octopuses became exceptional problem solvers, developing the cognitive ability to investigate complex environments, remember the locations of food sources, and figure out how to access prey hidden in difficult-to-reach places. The day octopus, which lives in tropical reefs swarming with predators, evolved different cognitive priorities. These octopuses became masters of camouflage and behavioral flexibility, capable of changing not just their color, but their entire behavioral pattern to mimic less threatening animals or blend into specific backgrounds with incredible precision. And then there are deep-sea octopuses, living in environments so dark that vision is almost useless. These species evolved enhanced chemical sensing and tactile processing, developing intelligence that operates primarily through touch and taste, building mental maps of their environment through information gathered by those semi-autonomous arms. This is convergent evolution of intelligence. Different species, facing different challenges, independently developing sophisticated cognitive abilities using the same basic blueprint of distributed neural processing. And it reveals something crucial about what intelligence actually is. Intelligence isn't one thing. It's not a single capability that you either have or don't have. It's a toolkit of cognitive abilities that evolve in response to specific environmental pressures. Octopuses evolved to problem solving because they needed to access hard-to-reach food. They evolved learning and memory because they needed to navigate complex reef systems and remember safe hiding spots. They evolved observational capabilities because any information, even from watching other animals, could mean the difference between life and death when you're a soft-bodied creature in an ocean full of predators. Each ability evolved independently to solve a specific survival challenge. But together, they created something that looks remarkably like general intelligence. A cognitive system flexible enough to handle problems evolution never specifically prepared it for. And that's what makes octopus intelligence genuinely dangerous to our understanding of cognition, because it proves that you don't need a vertebrate brain structure to develop sophisticated intelligence. You don't need centralized processing or a unified body map or millions of years of social evolution. You just need enough evolutionary pressure, enough time, and a nervous system with sufficient complexity to support learning and adaptation. The octopus achieved this with a nervous system organized nothing like ours, using distributed processing that operates on completely alien principles. And it achieved cognitive abilities that rival animals with brains far more similar to our own. This has profound implications. It suggests that intelligence might emerge anywhere that evolutionary pressure creates the need for flexible problem solving. It suggests that the specific architecture of the brain matters less than we thought, and it suggests that if we ever encounter intelligent life from other planets, it might think in ways so fundamentally different from us that we initially don't even recognize it as intelligence. Because that's exactly what happened with octopuses. For decades, scientists assumed they were simple creatures operating on instinct. They looked at that alien nervous system and concluded that real intelligence would be impossible. They were wrong. The octopus was intelligent all along. We just didn't recognize it because we were looking for intelligence that resembled our own. And once researchers started testing octopuses properly, presenting them with novel problems, observing how they learned, documenting their problem-solving abilities, the truth became undeniable. The octopus is dangerously intelligent, not because it's smarter than humans in absolute terms. It's dangerous because it proves that intelligence can emerge from neural architectures so different from ours, that studying them challenges everything we thought we knew about how cognition works. When an octopus unscrews a jar from the inside, it's not following some genetic program. It's analyzing the problem, understanding the mechanical principles, and inventing a solution in real time. When it learns to open puzzle boxes faster with each attempt, it's not just repeating a motor pattern. It's forming memories, extracting underlying principles, and applying learned knowledge to improve performance. When it watches another octopus solve a problem and then solves it faster itself, it's not acting on instinct. It's engaging in social learning despite being a solitary animal with no evolutionary history of social cognition. When it escapes from an aquarium by navigating multiple novel challenges in sequence, it's not lucky. It's planning, strategizing, solving each problem deliberately to achieve a distant goal. This is intelligence, real, flexible, general-purpose intelligence. And it's operating through a distributed nervous system where arms think semi-independently, where 60% of neurons are scattered across limbs instead of concentrated in a brain, where coordination happens through chemical communication between body parts rather than centralized control. The octopus proves that consciousness and cognition don't require the neural architecture we assumed they did. They don't require centralization or a unified sense of self, or the kind of brain structure that vertebrates have. They can emerge from completely alien organizational principles as long as the system is complex enough to support learning, memory, and flexible problem solving. And that's what makes the octopus so dangerously intelligent. Not because it threatens us directly, but because it threatens our assumptions about what intelligence requires, how it works, and what forms it can take. Every time an octopus solves a problem it has never encountered before, every time it learns from experience or observation, every time it demonstrates cognitive flexibility that rivals animals we consider smart, it's proving that intelligence is more diverse, more weird, and more alien than we ever imagined. The octopus is a mollusk with a nervous system organized like nothing else on Earth, solving problems with a brain that barely resembles ours, thinking thoughts that might be so fundamentally different from our thoughts that we can't even imagine what octopus consciousness feels like from the inside. And yet it works. It learns. It adapts. It outsmarts predators and prey and aquarium designers and researchers who underestimated it. That's dangerous intelligence. Not because it's malevolent, but because it's proof that the universe can produce minds that operate on completely different principles than the only kind of mind we've ever known, our own.